So good morning or good afternoon for those in India following us. So I just realized that we have about 100 people listening to the video broadcasting out of India. So I really appreciate the audience around the world and you coming here. And I think for me as an analyst, it's always an honor to be at Cordial and somehow challenging, right? So because you have to present fresh research and you cannot show the slides from last year. So, as you see, my name is Stefan Ried. I'm within Forrester Research. Forrester Research is an independent research organization, and we do research. We give speeches like this. We do also a lot of surveys and try to look for core technologies and business models. And I'm one of the people in a team called Business Technology Futures, which tries to put that together. So linking the technologies to what matters in the business. So my key question that I'd like to address here, looking at a big shift, is actually asking, is there a big shift? Right? So is there a big shift that where cloud computing really changed the business? So let's have a look what cloud computing is. Hopefully you've seen that before. That was my slide from, I think, 3 years ago. So that's the only one that I repeat, actually. We have cloud computing in various flavors around the infrastructure, the middleware, the application, and potentially also including an end-to-end business process where you could get people and systems with the same agility like just systems, right? So that was a little bit too visionary, so let's grade that out. But what is interesting is, and really that became kind of true, is that people are on the IT side realizing that cloud computing is not just a technology, it is a fundamental shift in how you provision business logic and infrastructure. And the magic words are basically an OpEx-based model. That means if a CIO transforms investment into something that he or she did, into an OpEx-based offering, pay-per-use, to the lines of business, then the CIO created a private cloud. If a cloud provider does this, either on a public global level or on a more local and more private level, we have one of those other offerings. But it's always important that you kind of transfer, either as a cloud provider or as a CIO, an investment into an OpEx model. Otherwise, the general principle of the pay-per-use of cloud computing is not given. So if you just put a bunch of server in a virtualized data center, you just have a virtualized data center, nothing more. Nothing to do with cloud computing. So what is really visible and understood is cloud computing obviously changed the way business, maybe, but definitely IT works. So one of the most fundamental shifts that has been around since a couple of months already in the market is something that we talked about last year, which is a cloud broker business model. So in addition to this OpEx-based consumption, pay-per-use, it could be even more dramatic, where you say, from the business side, you have the traditional roles on the business side, demand, governance, and usage. But somehow a machinery in between that works autonomously and gets provisioning out of the cloud, potentially the private or the public, or the virtual private in between. And this autonomy of the broker dynamic is really what matters. And they are actually the first cloud providers, both in the small and medium addressing space, and in the very large enterprise space that are embracing this kind of agility, where the enterprises simply describe well what they need, not only technology-wise, but also, for example, what kind of data is there? What kind of privacy, what kind of legal compliance do I need? Simply describing that into a workload classification, and it's going to be provisioned. And it was very interesting that Cordial commissioned Forrester to do an independent research talking to a good set of large cloud providers, asking how mature that actually is in the market. And it is, I think, now available from Cordial as a research paper. The next big change is on the platform. So did application development and application platforms actually change? And I think they have changed significantly. So here's how. First of all, there's a big shift in what developers realize they are using. So we asked in this survey a question, a survey to developer. It was a small initial sample. We will also do this with a larger sample. We asked, what would you call a complete environment to create, deploy, manage, and integrate applications, including development tools, administration, management tools, and runtime engines, which can be hosted either private or in an external environment or in a public cloud? Well, that's a pretty long sentence, isn't it? And the answer was very interesting. The majority of developers said, oh, we call this platform as a service. The next big chunk of 16% said, hey, this is cloud computing in general. So what do we learn from that? First of all, the term platform as a service really established itself. And secondly, the expectations to cloud computing from developers are growing up from just having virtual machines somewhere on an infrastructure as a service into that full set of pre-integrated functionality. Moving up from virtual machines where you just install maybe some hardware, instead of hardware on virtual machines, some software stacks and keep responsibility for all that, into a fully integrated platform stack. So we published a couple of years ago that kind of architecture or blueprint of a platform as a service. And what you see in here is that basically in the middle, you have a traditional kind of middleware application development stack. The key is that you should be able actually to develop general purpose applications. And it's interestingly that that is surrounded by a usage, subscription management, and a provider management like an app store and other things from, for the various ISVs and partners putting functionality on here. So key takeaway, multi-tenancy, the surrounding of cloud functionality, and actually the ability to create real applications. So that means there are many platforms in the cloud that does not meet that requirement. For example, if you look at all these very interesting data integration platforms that we call cloud-based integration, and you see examples like Boomi and Informatica Cloud and Cast Iron and HubSpend, for example, all of them serve a general purpose of integrating in the cloud, but you can hardly create real applications or composite applications with them. So they are not meeting our requirement for a platform as a service. So let's have a look what developers are actually doing. And I'm talking a little bit about developers here, although I think there are many people with a tie in the room, so you're not really developers. Developers are a very important go-to-market for cloud computing-based products. Why do I say this? Because traditionally, how you sell traditionally software. You know, you have these gray-haired, golf-playing sales reps coming in, making big deals, and then you have a big deal, you basically have a deal, then that deal turns all employees of a company into users, and hopefully they are using it. Otherwise, you sold shelfware. Right? Cloud computing is a total way around. It starts with usually a free usage, upselling in the individual commercial users, and then, very likely, if that is successful, upselling into a global enterprise subscription. So the pattern is use, customer, big deal. It's just the other way around like cloud computing. That's why we talk a lot about developers and developer adoption. So interesting is that the yellow one is what they did already, and the blue one is what they are planning. So still a lot of internal web applications as the first activity, and then obviously a lot of mobile stuff here in the future, and social computing. So the social, the mobile, the application integration, those are the scenarios that will be the most demanded over the next 12 months by developers. So the better a platform supports that, the more successful it will be in that seeding process from usage via individual users, individual customers into big deals. So another survey to a large sample of more than 1,000 IT decision makers asked which are the following middleware platforms you're planning to replace or complement with platform as a service. And the interesting thing here is the key takeaways from that slide is actually two key takeaways. First of all, platform as a service will grow significantly fast. You see the light green and the light blue is what people will do in 2 years, versus the darker green and the darker blue is what they do already today. So those bars, like the 16 and 6%, the light green and the light blue bars are in all categories bigger than the dark ones. That means there's a huge pipeline building up for those kind of platform as a service offerings, which is significantly higher as the current usage. And that's what we usually call a hyper-growth situation in go-to-market strategies. And secondly, what you see with the green and the blue colors in general, the green colors are talking about complement scenarios, while the blue colors are talking about replacements. So will people actually shut down something that they have on-premise because they do something in the cloud? Actually, in most cases, they do not. They keep some stuff on-premise for very good reasons. Maybe legal compliance, maybe, I don't know. Maybe simply the slow evolution that you have getting familiar and getting trust with one of those environments. And people do things a lot in the cloud at the same time. So this combination is very key. Therefore, platforms that do deploy in both ways, potentially being the same on-prem and in a cloud delivery model, are very interesting to many large enterprises. So the key takeaways, platform as a service is growing, and secondly, the complement scenarios, combinations, and hybrid scenarios are significantly important. So what kind of capabilities does platform as a service need? What kind of skills do you need? So let's have a look at the different capabilities. And the space of platform as a service is so emerging that we did actually 1.5 years back a Forrester Wave, which is the comparison of offerings for platform as a service. And I haven't pulled that up again because it's so outdated, only a little bit more than 1 year old, because the market changed so dramatically. So we looked at how does the market change and what kind of capabilities you see. And here are 6 capability maps on this slide and on the following on the following slide that we believe are the key capability segments of platform as a service. Foundational platform as a service, the first one is basically around the unique scalability of an application container. So if a developer doesn't care about high-level components, but if a developer simply looks at, for example, creating an application that may have 10 users, or the other day 10 million users, and you're not changing anything as a developer, scalability from 10 to 10 million, you move to foundational PaaS environments that are just doing that exactly very well. And examples are, for example, Salesforce.com's Heroku, or examples are Google's App Engine. They are pretty poor on the high-level value contribution, but they are extremely well on that scalability concept. To the other extreme, you have application-centric platform as a service. So those are the environments where very large software as a service apps are built on, surrounding the software as a service apps. These software as a service apps are either from the same vendor like the platform or ISV solutions on top of the platform. So for example, for ISV solutions like HumanWave, the HR system that runs on Cordial, Cordial is an application-centric platform as a service. And then you have another one where the process is key, really where you take the platform capabilities around the process. And obviously, you can imagine that Cordial plays in there as well. And then you have another 3-1, integration and legacy and content paths, which are basically, again, taking the integration capabilities or the porting of legacy stuff, combining it with cloud principles, or, for example, an enterprise content management system into the PaaS space. Again, just, for example, hosting an enterprise content management system in the cloud is not in content PaaS, with no means. But if you add a general-purpose application development environment and testing tools, maybe an agile environment, maybe an app store to it, then you're ending up with a content PaaS. Very interesting. The first guys moving in that space are, for example, Faber Software's Folio Cloud. So we looked at the focus. So where's the focus of all those vendors? So a lot of vendors are playing in that space. And it's really hard to compare them because they are not kind of boxed in one of those 6 segments, right? We can't exactly map, say, this is a content PaaS, or this is a process PaaS, or an integration PaaS, or an application PaaS. It doesn't work because many of the vendors and platforms are simply trying to get a different, maybe unique orchestration of those capabilities together. So we simply looked at the capabilities, and on that colorful map you see 6 different colors, and you see something like in space here, where you have those platform as a service offerings that are pretty much around foundational platform as a service. And you have obviously Cordial. At that time, when we did that research, only was the Cordial Process Factory, and I think Cordial will announce more around business operations platform in a full cloud model as well. So next time, probably Cordial will show up with 2 different products here. And what matters is, in my opinion, that you pick the right one, maybe 2 of those for your large enterprise. Maybe you have a foundational PaaS for scale-out social apps, and you have a process PaaS for the heavy duty of integrated systems, and still orchestrated to B2B networks and so on. So that is an interesting combination and a good balance between process and integration capabilities. So coming back to my initial question, does this really change the core business? Or are we still talking about IT? Are we? Okay, So I think the real music is playing in the business application. And let's lift up the discussion a little bit to figure out if the business application really changed. First of all, I'd like to introduce quickly a concept to look at business applications in two different perspectives. One is the so-called systems of record perspective, where you have the kind of core applications that are kind of boring commodity, but you have to do it. That is like financial accounting systems, for example. And then you have, at the edge of the enterprise, the so-called systems of engagement. The systems of engagement help you to engage in a new way, maybe in a social enterprise way, maybe in a new collaboration way, with your employees, your customers, your business partners, and obviously devices, like smart computing and embedded and the Internet of the Thing. That is what happens in the systems of engagement. So again, is this kind of brick and mortar business really changing until now? And I think no. Big disappointment. No, it hasn't changed. Those folks are doing business the same as they did before cloud computing. And please tell me if you found an evidence where that is not really true. Why? Because most of those people are in a competitive race. Most of these kind of traditional enterprises are just trying to compete by doing things maybe a little bit faster, or maybe a little bit cheaper, or maybe a little bit better. So they are kind of in a competitive race, and it's very hard to kind of compete in a new way if you are in a commodity business like the construction industry or like the manufacturing industry or many, many industries. And if you are familiar with the marketing concept of the blue ocean theory, most companies are actually swimming in the red ocean. So the red ocean is actually a very unpleasant place to be, right? Every big deal that you make costs you a lot of margin. And you see the competitors like sharks biting in your legs, and there's a lot of blood in the red ocean, so it's a very unpleasant place to be. On the other side, where the successful companies want to be, is the kind of blue ocean area, where you have a lot of water to swim freely, you have a great idea, and you kind of let the competitors behind you because you define, for example, a market segment or a value proposition that nobody else has. So that's pretty much the way, for example, where Apple is with their hardware, and that's kind of where Dell is with their hardware. I'm not saying that is a bad place, totally. You still can do a lot of volume here, but it's a very, in general, unpleasant place to be. So I'd like to introduce the concept of business technology. So business technology is something that people helps, especially CIOs, to bridge, not only bridge the gap between business and IT, that's a kind of old story, but business technology is the way how to become relevant as a CIO to drive the top line, not only the bottom line. Not only saving cost and so on, really driving the top line. And here's also a definition for business technology for your reading. Business technology basically helps the CIOs to move from the red ocean into a blue ocean business. So we asked, again, CIOs and business decision makers, what is your motivation to cloud computing? And it's interesting how that changed. So if you do surveys like I do over 5 years at Forrester, you keep some questions exactly the same to track them over years, which is a kind of nice thing to do. So cloud computing was in the beginning mainly about cost and scalability. Then it was about speed and agility. In the future, it will be a lot about collaboration. So this is interesting. So what is collaboration like? Maybe collaboration, B2B collaboration, can help the CIOs to embrace business technology and help the COOs and the sales and the marketing and the general business to move into blue oceans. So here are 3 archetypes of collaboration. And I'd like to encourage you to read those documents. It's really interesting stuff because some of that is happening already, but people haven't realized the concept behind it. So take, for example, shared structured data. The examples are data.com from salesforce.com. That's where you have a shared customer database that you actually share with your competitor. Isn't that crazy in CRM? Right? Until recently, people thought, well, my customer records is my crown jewels. That's my secret. Right? That's my key asset in a CRM system. No, it is not, because the customer records are always messed up. I haven't seen a CRM system that hasn't messed up customer records. Have you? So the concept here is to share the data, but keep the relation secret. Totally new privacy concept. So each company has a very private and secret relation to a record, but the record itself is shared. And the same concept works with unstructured documents. Many of you are familiar with Google documents. You can easily share a Google document with everybody. You have control of the sharing, and you can manage the versioning of it, and so on. And you could also do the same with processes. Think of B2B auctions, for example, where you have a process where at the same time multiple customers are in. So before you share, you have to look at data. You have to find the data. And we've seen in the presentation from Johan from Shell, and that's a pretty tough job, right? You need to have a canonical data model. You need to do a lot of duties. And we described this in data virtualization approach. That's a report that was recently published, last year published from Forrester, explaining canonical data models. And it's good to see that Cordial also now moves up into entity modeling, not only process modeling, to kind of address those problems holistically. Nevertheless, it's a pretty tough job to do if you do it in a traditional environment. It burns millions, it burns a lot of effort, it takes great architects to get it implemented. So maybe the cloud can crack the nut here. Have a look at the cloud. So if we talk about sharing, we have to look at the privacy models, first of all, quickly. So what do you see here? Here you see the 3 different levels of multi-tenancy. So you can reach multi-tenancy simply by doing virtualization. That's the old way. That's how we did it always. That's like the presentation from Freek van Vermeulen was very good because it kind of paved the road for me, not explaining what unbiased opinion and all the old habits are. Right? So simply that is the old habit. Right, doing it by virtualization and just put the old application there. Okay. The second paradigm is what you see in real multi-tenant software as a service applications today. That's more interesting. They have a canonical data model. Those are the large SaaS players that are really running on one platform and make sure that the metadata is dealing with the tenancy mapping. But still, a single tenant is isolated, isn't it? Right? So the single tenant is isolated. And that's the last paradigm that I'd like to introduce, which I call collaborative tenancy, where you're not isolating tenants, where you are isolating context. And that is a very exciting concept that I'm sharing the first time in public today. Again, put it in comparison. That's the old model. Imagine you have a trading chain, right? Chinese supplier, global trader, US or European retailer. And there are many people here in the room that understood how ERP systems work, probably much better than I do. So what you do, actually, you have an accounts receivable and an accounts payable record in each system. So when the goods are flowing, you want to initiate the money flow back by putting the accounts receivable record, playing it over with business B2B integration into the accounts payable thing. Jan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what it is. And it's a lot of manual effort, right? You have to transport the data, you have to map the data, you have to manually control if that is correct. Isn't that old-fashioned? So even if you imagine that all of that happen in one SaaS environment, where you do have a canonical data model, okay, you don't have to transport it from one platform to the other. You don't have to map it, because ideally you have you have the same data structures, but you're basically copying it over from one tenant to the other, because the tenant is isolated. And what we envision at Forrester is the next evolution, to kind of help you to jump out of your isolation in one tenant to jump into something that we call business networks. And the business network concept in this example of structured data, and you could carry out examples of business networks in the same way for unstructured data and for the process itself, looks like this, that you describe a trust relation from, for example, the manufacturer, and say simply, that record of accounts receivable is actually the same record like the accounts payable record in the other tenant. So you are not giving up the privacy on all your accounts payable records, but only on those that are related to that trust relation, to that B2B relation in this example. So somehow, I think people spend by far too long fixing things with entity relationship models. I think that's a commodity. People should start thinking about trust relationship models, creating trust rules that make sure data is not only flowing fluently, but also directly accessed in a merged cloud platform. This was not possible before because people were not in the cloud on unified platforms. This is now possible because people share platforms. Obviously, those kind of concepts are potentially federated and combined with traditional B2B integration and traditional tenant-to-tenant copy things. And here's the definition of the business networks. So what I'd like to encourage you is, if you go home from Cordial, think about your industry. Think about how you can change things, how you can really change your core business, not the way you run IT. And I'd like to share a story with you that happened to me in my past when I talked, it's actually 5 years back, when I talked to a CIO of a major logistics firm, a global acting logistics firm. Unfortunately, I cannot name them. And I asked him, why are the prices for the transport of parcels for the very large customers so much cheaper than for the, I don't name numbers, than for the average consumers? And he simply said, well, we monetize trust. What do you mean we monetize trust? Well, one of our large customers is, for example, a computer manufacturer. They ship between 25,000 and 100,000 parcels every day with our logistics firm. And this CIO told me further on that they do not check the weight and size and postage of every parcel. They just trust. They basically coupled the packaging slip system from the manufacturer to the line items of the invoice of the logistiker, and the logistics firm simply aggregates that invoice per day and sends it back to the manufacturer to be paid. I said, isn't that risky? Actually, the manufacturer creates the invoices that they are going to pay on their own. Yeah, it is risky. But the benefit that we get out of saving and cutting off the actual scanning of every package is by far more valuable than the risk of having maybe 0.1% of oversized or overweight packages per day. At that time, it was done with manual point-to-point integration. Imagine how that could work if you are in a cloud business network. So here's my motivation. If you are a CIO, if you're a head of IT or an architect or a business analyst or simply a new customer to a cloud vendor, challenge those vendors. Come up with those new business network ideas that sound so crazy that most of us couldn't imagine it. And then you take the change. Then you get the banana from the other previous talk. Right? So challenge the vendors, because the vendors don't understand your business. You understand your business the best. Finally, you will have concerns. There will be many concerns of security, privacy, and so on. So your lawyers will go to your office and say, you can't share the database with your competitors. Well, I can if I'm being selective. You can't share the invoices that are coming in with the suppliers. Well, have we tried? So the point is, think of the concerns, and I give you one example. I'm taking the example of ERP systems again. So ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, that term wasn't even around, only I looked it up 23 years ago. So Jan remembers that very well. So at that time, enterprises had scattered departmental applications for material management, for production planning, for financial resources, for human resources, and maybe something like IBM MQ running messages around. And those departments had, with good reasons at that time, a lot of concerns against each other. That financial data needs to be separated from human data, needs to be separated from something else. Oops. Lost my speech. So there were concerns inside a large enterprise that are actually very similar to the concerns that we have in B2B relations today. And it's very interesting that those concerns have been totally overcome with the appeal of ERP systems. Because what ERP systems at that time basically did, simply say we have one big database and we put all the enterprise resource planning data from all fractions into the single database. And that creates the initial value of an ERP system. Clicking up to the future, that's exactly what business networks are doing in the cloud for business relations beyond enterprises. So you see how quickly the paradigm changed from departmental applications to ERP systems and potentially business networks in the cloud. And if you wonder about the speed of change, if you wonder how quickly the future comes to you, I have one closing remark to you. So this is my favorite scene from Star Trek 4. This is where Scotty and Kirk were beamed down to the Earth in the 1980s and to solve a very difficult problem. And you know, on Starship Enterprise, you just talk to the computer. Say, computer, do this and that. So Scotty wanted to use the leading edge computer, right, of the scientist and approached him and said, computer. Nothing happened. And Kirk wanted to help him and said, Scotty, you have to use the mouse. So he took up the mouse and said, computer. What does this tell us? This tells us that a paradigm, for example, look at the keyboard, at the mouse, and direct speech recognition. So the paradigm in between was already totally lost because people realized it 80 years later, it's useless. Right? So maybe this example helps you to understand how quickly cloud computing with a business relevance can help you to change from IT to business technology. And maybe next time somebody sits next to you and pulls out a computer of that size without a real keyboard, without a mouse, and suddenly starts talking to it. Siri, message to my wife. Siri is not even on that computer. It's a cloud service, and it's called an iPhone. Thank you.
Stefan, that was really great. That was really great. And again, please accept this gift as our token of appreciation for the 4th. I think you have all 4 now. That's the whole series.
So it's difficult to find another century.
We're running out of centuries. Thank you very much.